Welcome to Cold Hearted, the podcast that delves into the chilling stories of America's most notorious female serial killers. Each episode uncovers the dark truths behind these shocking crimes, inspired by my book, Cold Hearted, America's Most Notorious Female Serial Killers. Grab your copy through the link in the description, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more gripping episodes. Now, let's dive into today's story.
Okay, so get this right. You think you know poisoners? Like, really know them? Well, get ready to dive into this unsettling story of this, seemingly devout church-going grandmother. They called her, get this, death row granny.
Wow.
Yeah, death row granny Margie Velma Barfield. And we're going to unpack her chilling story. But we're not just listing crimes, right? We're going like way deeper, trying to understand what made this woman tick. Right. What turned a church-going grandmother into, well, a cold-blooded killer?
You know what's so fascinating about this case? It's that Barfield's case. It's not just another one of those, true crime stories. It's way more than that. It, makes us confront this possibility, that darkness can be hiding, lurking underneath even the most ordinary facade.
Like a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Exactly. And we've got all this stuff. We've got court documents. We've got news articles. We've even got a book co-written by Barfield herself.
Whoa, wait, she wrote a book?
Yeah. Can you imagine, getting inside the mind of a killer, right? Through their own words.
That's intense. So that's our mission today, right? To go beyond just the headlines and really try to piece together like a puzzle, right? The psychological puzzle that was Margie Velma Barfield. Where do we even begin with this?
Well, I think the best place to start is with her life, right? Starting way back with her childhood in rural North Carolina.
Okay, makes sense. So what do we know about her early years?
Well, she claimed she had a difficult childhood, right? Said she was abused by her father. But the thing is, some of her siblings, they've disputed those accounts.
Oh, really? So it's not so clear-cut.
Right. And, we have to remember, family dynamics, they can be really complex. And memories, especially as tied to trauma, can be, really subjective.
So we can't just take her claims at face value? Is that what you're saying?
Not necessarily. I think what's important is we, acknowledge the potential impact of, that kind of tumultuous upbringing. Even if the abuse wasn't as severe as she claimed, even any level of childhood trauma, it can have those lasting psychological effects.
Right. That makes sense. Okay, so we have this potentially difficult childhood, and then comes the first tragedy in her life. And this is one that's shrouded in suspicion. It's really strange. So back in 1969, her first husband, Thomas Burke, he died in a house fire.
Right.
And officially it was ruled an accident. But there was always something that felt off about it.
Yeah. And what's interesting? You got to remember arson investigations, they weren't as sophisticated back then.
Right.
But even with the limited technology, they had certain details. They really raised some red flags.
Like what kind of details?
Well, for one, Barfield had this history of hiding and destroying Burke's alcohol, right? And that kind of suggests there was this, controlling dynamic in their relationship.
Interesting.
And get this, just a few months after his death, her house burns down again, this time with an insurance payout.
Wait a minute. Her house burned down twice?
Twice.
That seems like, I don't know, more than just a coincidence.
Right. It's hard not to, connect the dots and wonder if those fires were really accidental, especially knowing what we know now about her later crimes.
Yeah, no kidding. And that brings us to the arsenic. Now, I know arsenic, it's a classic poison, right?
Yeah.
But to be honest, I don't really know much about it. What are the effects? How easy was it to even get back then?
Well, arsenic, it was pretty readily available back then. You could find it in, rat poison, insecticides, things like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was relatively slow acting, which is what made it, so dangerous, right?
Right.
It mimicked the symptoms of common illnesses, things like the flu or gastroenteritis, so it was really hard to detect.
So basically, it was easy to get and in a twisted way, kind of perfect for her purposes.
Exactly.
But how did she even know about it? Did she know how to use it? Was that common knowledge back then?
That is the question, isn't it? And unfortunately, we don't really have all the answers. Some people, they speculate that she might have learned about it from her work. She was a nursing assistant. Others think maybe she got information from home remedy books, or even folklore.
It's kind of chilling to think about that she could just, acquire this deadly knowledge and then use it so deceptively.
Absolutely. And you have to remember, she presented herself as a caregiver, right? Someone who took care of the sick. So it created this perfect cover. She could administer the poison, observe the symptoms, even pretend to nurse her victims back to health.
That's just, I don't know, it makes the whole thing even more sinister. She was using this role, this perceived role, as a healer to mask her actions as a killer. And this wasn't just a one-time thing.
No, not at all. After Thomas's death, Barfield married a widower, Jennings Barfield, and less than a year later, Jennings died. And guess what? They later found traces of arsenic in his exhumed body.
Oh my gosh.
So this pattern starts to emerge, right? This chilling pattern of deaths, and it raises a huge question. Was this just a string of bad luck, a bunch of unfortunate coincidences, or was it something far more sinister? It really is a chilling thought, right? Someone using what they know about, caring for people to actually hurt them, and it didn't stop with Jennings.
So who else was there? I mean, how many people fell victim to her arsenic?
Well, over the next, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years, there was this string of deaths. People close to Barfield, they just kept dying. Her own mother, Lily Bullard, she died after having these symptoms that were, eerily similar to Jennings. And then 2 of her employers, Dolly Edwards and John Henry Lee, they both died too under, let's just say, questionable circumstances. Both had signs of arsenic poisoning.
It's almost unbelievable that she got away with this for so long. Like, did no one suspect anything? How is that even possible?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to remember that this was back then, right? Forensic science, it wasn't what it is today. And arsenic poisoning with those flu-like symptoms, I mean, doctors, they often misdiagnosed it as natural causes.
Oh, wow.
And then you have Barfield herself, right? She was so good at blending in. She went to church. She was active in her community. Everyone saw her as this grieving widow or daughter, like the perfect picture. Right?
Just goes to show you, right? Appearances can be deceiving. Evil can, like, hide in plain sight. But there's something else about this case that really gets to me. It's what she did at the funerals of the people she poisoned.
Oh, yeah, you're talking about her attending their funerals.
Yes. Like, can you imagine? She'd go to these funerals, grieving, offering comfort to the families. It just sends shivers down my spine, thinking about the level of, like, deception.
Yeah.
The manipulation. I mean, how could she grieve for people she killed?
It's hard to wrap your head around, right? I mean, it speaks to this, like, compartmentalization, Emotional detachment, it's really hard to grasp. It's almost like she built this separate reality in her head where she could be this loving caregiver and this cold-hearted killer all at the same time.
That's just wild. Yeah. It all seems so calculated, so cold-blooded. But was there ever any sign?
If this story has you hooked, you'll love diving deeper into Cold-Hearted, America's most notorious female serial killers. Don't wait. Grab your copy now through the link in the description. And while you're here, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more gripping content. Now, let's get back to the story.
Time that she, felt any remorse, any guilt at all.
Oh, that's a tough one, especially when you consider she later claimed she had this religious conversion, when she was on death row. But before we get into that, we should talk about the case that finally brought her down, the death of Stuart Taylor.
Oh, yeah, Stuart Taylor. He was her fiance, right?
Yeah.
His death, that was like the turning point.
Absolutely. See, unlike her other victims, Taylor's family, they were suspicious. I mean, they didn't buy that natural causes explanation, especially after the police got this tip, about Barfield possibly being involved in those other deaths.
So they pushed for an autopsy.
They did, and that's when it all started to unravel. The autopsy, it showed clear evidence of arsenic poisoning. Barfield was arrested, charged with Taylor's murder, and that was the beginning of the end for her.
So what was her defense? Did she try to, deny everything?
Her defense, it was really interesting. It was this mix of confession and denial. She admitted to poisoning Taylor, but she said she only meant to make him sick, not kill him. And she said her motive was to buy herself some time to cover up some financial stuff she'd done, like forging checks on his account.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And she admitted to doing the same thing to her mother and the 2 employers. Said, over and over that her goal was just to make them sick, not to actually kill them.
It sounds like she was trying to downplay everything, right? Make herself seem like this desperate woman instead of this, cold-blooded killer. Did the jury buy it?
No, they didn't. The jury saw through it. They found her guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced her to death. She became the first woman in the U.S. to get the death penalty after it was reinstated in 1976.
So Death Row Granny was born.
Exactly.
And then, as we mentioned earlier, things take another turn. She found religion, right, on death row.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to begin with that. Like, how do we even make sense of that?
Well, that's where this whole psychological puzzle gets even more complicated. You're left trying to figure out, could a woman who did all these horrible things, could she really have a genuine change of heart? You know, this spiritual transformation.
I mean, it's a lot to take in.
Hmm.
You know, a woman who poisons all these people then finds God on death row. Was it real? Or was it just, some tactic to get people on her side?
That's the question, isn't it? Some people saw it as, a last-ditch effort to get out of her execution. But others, some pretty prominent people, actually, even Billy Graham, they believed her, that it was a true conversion.
I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine someone who could be so, cruel, so calculating, and then suddenly become deeply religious. It just seems, I don't know, a little too convenient.
Yeah, I get it. It's tough to reconcile, right? Like her past actions and then this image of her as this repentant woman, looking for redemption. But we have to remember, people are complex. Maybe facing death, her own mortality, maybe she found some comfort in religion, a way to deal with what she had done and what was about to happen to her.
So you're saying it could have been both. A genuine thing, but also a way to, maybe try and manipulate the system.
It's possible. We may never know for sure. But it just adds another layer to this whole story.
Okay, but she was still going to be executed, right? Did her, her conversion, did it change anything?
Well, even with appeals and people asking for clemency, they upheld her death sentence. Her case, it became really tied up in the politics of the time. Granting clemency, it would have been seen as, a sign of weakness, especially with an election coming up.
Oh, wow. Politics got involved. How did that happen?
So this was back in 1984, and the death penalty, it was a big issue. Governor Jim Hunt, he was in a tough race against Jesse Helms, and there was all this pressure to be tough on crime. Denying clemency to Barfield, especially since she was a woman and she had poisoned all these people, it was a way for Hunt to, take a stand.
So basically, Velma Barfield, she became like a pawn in this whole political game.
It's sad, but that's how it goes sometimes. With these big death penalty cases, they become these symbols, these battlegrounds for all these bigger debates about justice and punishment and the role of the government.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
So on November 2nd, 1984, Margie Velma Barfield, she was executed. Lethal injection. The first woman put to death in the U.S. since they brought back the death penalty. And even then, in those final moments, there was this one detail that really stood out to me. I don't know why, but it seemed so strange.
You're talking about what she wore, right?
Yeah. The pink pajamas and the adult diaper. It just seems so, I don't know, so out of place with everything else going on.
Yeah, it's an image that sticks with you, doesn't it?
It does. It's like this weird contrast.
Yeah.
This really serious final moment, and then these everyday things.
It's almost like a reminder that underneath this label of death row granny, there was this real person facing death, in this strange way.
You never thought about it like that.
And maybe, maybe that's the thing we remember most from Barfield's story. That even when we're dealing with something so dark, so evil, there's still this human element there, this reminder that we're all complicated and, good and bad can exist in the same person.
Wow. That's really profound. So we've covered so much today, Barfield's childhood, the poisonings, her conversion, her execution. It's just, there's so much there. But what gets me is you still don't really know why she did it. Was it about control? Was it about money? Was it something darker?
Those are questions that we'll probably never have answers to. They make us question what we know about human nature, about how someone can seem so ordinary, but have this darkness inside them. Margie Velma Barfield, she was more than just a name in the news, more than just a monster. She was complicated. She could be loving and she could do terrible things. And in the end, maybe the scariest part is realizing that good and evil, they're not always so clear-cut, that darkness can be anywhere.
It is a chilling thought, but it's something we have to think about. As we go through life meeting all these people, it's good to remember that everyone has a story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes those stories, they have secrets, things we might never understand. So the next time you meet someone new, think about what might be beneath the surface, what stories they're carrying. Because like we saw with Margie Velma Barfield, you just never really know what's hidden inside
Cold-hearted. Thank you for joining me as we uncovered another chilling tale of America's most notorious female serial killers. If you're hungry for more, grab a copy of my book, Cold-Hearted, America's Most Notorious Female Serial Killers, through the link in the description. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Until next time, stay curious, and stay safe.